This is the first webinar in a three-part series we're doing here at Hex about the state of data teams. This was originally kicked off by a survey that we did of over 2,000 data leaders across the country, um, talking about trends that they're noticing, technical challenges they're facing, and what they're thinking about in 2025. And we found a few really interesting themes in that study, and we wanted to bring a webinar series to the world just to help all of you. If you're a data person and you're thinking about what's next for you or how your role might be changing and how you can adapt to some of the technical trends we're all facing right now, hopefully this is a helpful conversation series. We have a panel of experts who are data leaders, um, who are here to discuss these topics. Today's topic is AI. So we'll be talking about all things AI on data, what tools are helping teams right now, what are some things on the horizon that you might want to be paying attention to. Next week's session will be on self-serve and BI trends, and then we'll talk about data governance in the third part of our series. So if you like what you see today, please feel free to come back and join us again. Just for our agenda today, just to introduce myself, I'm Charles Schaefer. I lead product marketing for Hex. We have a panel of data leaders from across a variety of different industries and functions that I'm excited to introduce in just a second. I'm going to turn over the conversation to them for the majority of our time today. We have about 45 minutes scheduled to get their hopefully unfiltered thoughts about how AI is affecting them today. I'll share a little bit about our POV. It wouldn't be a vendor webinar unless I pitched you on Hex, but we'll keep the pitching light and we'll focus mostly on the stories from our experts. And I'll share a little bit about what we're working on as well. And throughout, I'll sprinkle in some stats from our study, which I think was really interesting. We did this survey at the beginning of the year, reached out to over 2,000 data leaders and asked all sorts of questions. What's your greatest aspiration for your data team? What do you use for data storage and query? How are you thinking about AI? What are some of your priorities right now? We got responses from a ton of really interesting organizations, really senior audience, people that lead data teams and report to C-level executives. So I think you're going to be hearing in this series, and if you go read the report, which you're welcome to do, it's open for everyone to read. You'll hear the perspectives of what data leaders are thinking about right now. And some of this is changing even since we did the study. As I was talking to these folks yesterday, I've noticed that technology is changing so fast that how people are adopting things like AI is really evolving on month-to-month timeframes, not year over year. Some of the things we're going to dig into today are there's a ton of excitement around AI. There's a ton of possibilities, and data leaders are starting to see some of the ways that it can help make their insights more advanced, make their teams more efficient, some of the ways they might be impacting hiring. There's also a lot of confusion. What is real versus what is just a cool looking vendor demo? What is going to be the implication on data privacy? How are our jobs going to change? There's a lot of confusion and there's not really a roadmap for adopting these technologies yet. And one of the big themes we noticed is that there's still some uncertainty about what is hype and what is reality. And since that's changing so fast, uh, attitudes are really varied across the industry. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to use the Q&A button here in Zoom to ask a question. We'll be monitoring that throughout. We do have some time scheduled for the end to do some Q&A with our panel. So if your question gets deferred till the end, please don't be offended. We're going to try to make time to answer any questions that you have. If we don't have time, we'll reach out to you afterward. We're also going to send a recording of this session out afterward if you want to share it with anyone or if you want to review for tidbits that you may have missed. So without further ado, let's jump into our panel discussion. I'm really excited to introduce these folks. I'm going to ask them to say a little bit about themselves in just a moment. But just to give you a brief introduction, we have Stephen Mosley, who is leading data strategy and analytics at HubSpot, Kelly Burdine, who is responsible for data science at Wealthy, and Brent Driscoll, who's responsible for analytics and product strategy at Harvest Hosts. three really senior data folks who are thinking about the impact of AI on data at their organization. And I'm really excited to get their perspective. So as a means to opening up the discussion, I'm going to start with you, Stephen, and I'm going to ask all of you to just briefly introduce yourself, say a little bit about what you do, and then if you have an example of how your team is using AI today, I'd love to hear it. So, Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity and for having me. Stephen Mosley, I've been at HubSpot for about 5 years. I sit, within the central ops organization. I'm responsible for, the tooling and infrastructure that we use for data warehousing, analytics, et cetera, as well as sort of the enablement, data governance, so how people are using those platforms. Um, our organization, we've got about 150 analysts who are, developing on our platform, 50 analytics engineers, and 25 data scientists and MLEs who are sort of developing on our platform, and then about, 6 or 7 thousand monthly users of the things that we're building. So, kind of a sizable org that we're working with, and thinking about scale and efficiency is definitely top of mind for us. In terms of how our teams are using AI today, there's really two areas where we're very opinionated about what people should be doing. The first is for our developers, so for our analytics engineers, our MLEs, and our data scientists, that they should be using a tool like Cursor or Claude Code. We're mostly a Cursor shop to accelerate their development work, but also I think those tools have made rapid gains in actually automating a lot of the development workflows recently. And then the second is for our analyst community using a copilot. So we are a Hex shop, using a tool like Hex Magic to accelerate how code is generated for the purpose of data exploration and sort of like generating advanced analyses. And then I'd say the frontier that we're pushing on, where we're also opinionated, but I don't think the technology is quite there yet, is that our business users should be using AI and sort of like a chat-like interface for discovery and eventually self-service.
Cool. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Next, we have Kelly from Wealthy. Kelly, I'd love to hear the same from you. Introduction and then an example, if you have one, of how your team is using AI today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've been at Wealthy for 3.5 years now, and I head up a central data team that we help anyone from marketing to product to sales on, using data to drive insights and help with decision making. And similar to what Steven said, we are using Cursor for all of our development. So we're using a lot of AI throughout that process. As one example, we use DBT for all of our transformations. And so, for a while now, we've been using AI to generate all of our YAML files for any type of new model that we're creating. Um, and then we are starting to use AI within our BI tool. We use ThoughtSpot, um, and been we haven't released it in the wild yet to our business users, but we've been testing it pretty thoroughly and using it ourselves, and pretty impressed so far with what it's doing. Um, but I think beyond that, some ways that we've been using it are. Um, at being a product company, a lot of our data comes from our platform database from that product. And sometimes it can be tricky understanding what the data means, how it works. You see a null value and you're not sure what exactly that might mean, for an example. And we've been using it a lot to explore our code base. Not being a software engineer, sometimes it can be difficult to understand how that data is getting generated. And so being able to ask it questions and getting back pretty reliable, accurate answers has kind of been a game changer for us, and really sped up some development and in troubleshooting and things like that. So that's another example.
Very cool. Thank you, Kelly. And third, we have Brent Driscoll. Brent, would you like to introduce yourself? And if you have any examples as well, I'd love to hear those.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Brent. I've been at Harvest Hosts for about 3 years now. Um, and I was laughing to myself when Steven gave his numbers of his org, because my company is about half the size of the number of his analysts. Um, So I can provide like that side of the scale here. Um, yeah, I do analytics, data science, a team of two. So we have to handle the entire data processing all the way to insights and like what should we actually do in the product. Um, and we've been doing a lot of the stuff that Stephen and Kelly mentioned. The only addition I would put on there is, again, we have no data scientists, just like analysts. So we use AI for classification and extraction tasks, and it's been super useful for us that way.
Great. Yeah, I think I love that we have folks representative of both like big and large organizations here. There's definitely commonalities in how different sizes of organizations are adopting AI. For example, Cursor seems like it's all over the place. But there's also differences. And one of the things I've noticed is that the smaller the team you are, um, the more the individual analysts have to take on. They're taking on data science and analytics, and perhaps, some of the things a data engineer might do as well. Whereas there might be specialists to do that at a larger organization. But one of the things that um, I noticed as I looked through the results of this study was that data teams are kind of increasingly taking on more and more of that cycle. It's no longer something where it's just a BI team or just a data science team. It's a team that is looking at the whole spectrum of analytics and has people focused on all of those different steps, which I think is really interesting as data teams get more and more strategic in the organization. As we asked the participants of our study about AI, this stat kind of stood out to me as interesting, where 77% of the people that responded to our survey said, we're excited about AI. There's tons of great possibilities here. But when we ask what their priorities were, like what are the top focus areas for them and their team, only 3% said AI. So there's a gap here. There's a gap between the excitement and people actually putting AI into practice. And this was just 4 or 5 months ago when we sent out the survey. And now I'm talking to 3 data leaders, and all of them have a strategy, which is really interesting. It might be that they don't think they're using AI as much as they could. It might be that the technology is changing so rapidly that people are doing different things than they were just at the beginning of the year. I think that's part of the fear that a lot of the organizations out there have around AI. But some of the things that we heard in the study were, one, AI is kind of uncontroversial. Like it's just sort of obvious that it's going to affect all of our workflows and we want to use it more. But at the same time, in the same breath, we're worried. We're worried about hallucinations. We're worried that technology is going to change and we might want to wait before we implement something new because there's a big investment in change management in implementing new technologies. So I think that sort of reflects some of that gap between excitement and practice that we saw in the study. Um, I'm curious to get people's perspectives on this. I'd love maybe Brent, if you could help me with this one, and I'll ask some other questions as we go to help flesh out this idea. Are there things that have blocked you from using AI more?
Yeah, I think especially being the data team of two, there's in summary like time and perceived opportunity costs. Like product roadmaps tend to have momentum, and it takes lots of energy and time to change the direction of that momentum. Um, and I think myself included here, uh, most people's understanding of what AI can do is rooted in the days of like how many R's are in strawberry, and then we laugh at how bad AI is. Um, but I think that at least at my company and my circles and all that, that has definitely changed recently, where people are much more frequently seeing how useful it can be.
Brent, would you say just like the point you're making of like maybe there's even a year ago or 6 months ago, there was some examples of like AI making mistakes. Um, is your perspective that like things have changed enough that maybe people like who are skeptical of AI need to be giving it like a fresh look, or that people maybe need to be more aggressive about adopting it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, test it, see what it can do. But I think two things, in my opinion. Uh, the models have improved dramatically over the past year, like even the past couple of weeks and months, but definitely over the past year. Um, and then also the like tools and frameworks and all of that surrounding it have just made everything a lot easier. Um, yeah, like MCP changes a lot of stuff for developing things in-house, like even a non-engineer can build things like me. And just the APIs are a little bit more advanced, like OpenAI responses versus chat completions. It makes it a whole lot easier to do classification tasks.
Cool. Thank you. Stephen, I'm curious about your opinion here because you mentioned, AI is pretty ingrained in like your analytics engineers and analyst techniques right now. And it seems like it's maybe still on the horizon for like how business users are interacting with data. What's your point of view right now for how AI can support business users?
Yeah, I mean, we have a sort of a long-term roadmap for how we hope for it to support business users. Right now, we're starting by investing in basic question deflection. So, uh, we right now are sort of a Looker shop for our dashboards, and one of the biggest bits of feedback that we get about Looker is it's hard for me to find the data, and once I find it, I don't know if I can trust it. And then, learning to manipulate it in Looker, you still need to learn the Explorer interface, and there's still some sort of like technical barriers. And so, using AI to address that basic question deflection need, we think that's a really great place to start, and to just help alleviate any questions about discovery and like basic manipulation of core business metrics. So that's where we're starting, and even that is a challenging problem at the scale that HubSpot has. We found that AI can do really well if you're building it on sort of a narrowly scoped semantic model, but once the semantic model expands, the AI needs to, and it sort of introduces the need for the AI to make assumptions about interpretation, which reduces like the determinism in the output, which is sort of the whole point, right? So that's what we're focusing on right now. That's a big active area of development for us. And again, we have goals of bringing more advanced reasoning into this agent like over time, which I honestly think will be easy relative to the complexity and challenge of just getting it to write the correct SQL 100% of the time, right?
Yeah. Um, Thanks for that color. Follow-up question for you on that topic. You mentioned like the semantic model as
Yeah.
both like an important element of proving accuracy around responses when business users start interacting with data, but also something that maybe can be at least perceived as limiting in terms of like what's built into the semantic model.
Yep.
Um, do you like what role do you see the semantic model playing? And like, do you have to have that in place first before you can get analytics turned on for business users and get them self-serving with data? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, in our experience, you definitely like it's necessary but not sufficient, right? So you need and again, we're still working through exactly what our strategy is for building the semantic model and exposing it to the AI so that the AI is bringing the proper context into the prompt that it's executing. This is another like aside, but just in terms of how fast the industry is going, context engineering, I think, is the new hot term from the last 2 weeks. And that's actually a lot of what we're spending our time doing. That's a really nice term that sort of describes what we're attempting to do with the semantic model, is using it to bring the appropriate context into the model so it can generate the right SQL and build the right response. And the semantic model is really just a tool to like expose the right context to the model to do that. And so having it in place, plus whatever else you need to ensure that the right context is provided to the model, is really the name of the game. Sylvia, I saw your question come through on the chat. It's really interesting. I think that the approach that we're taking to determining what the basic questions are is we're starting with the certified dashboards that sit within each function, and then like reverse engineering those into the conversational interface. and we're using that to like determine what our basic questions are. It's like anything that would sit on like a core KPI dashboard for one of our functional teams. So it's not everything, right?
Thanks for that, Stephen.
Yeah.
Um, so, and by the way, like I think AI has forced us to kind of rethink what it means to provide self-serve access to data, and that's sort of the next topic for our next webinar. So if you're interested in that topic, just a shameless plug to join us next week. But we'll be talking a little bit more about that today as well. Kelly, I'd love to get your perspective on this. Brent brought this up, and I think any organization, as you're thinking about like what's a blocker to adoption of a new technology, part of it is just prioritization and budget and being able to make room to investigate and implement new technologies. How are you thinking about that right now? How do you balance AI priorities versus the other priorities that your team has?
Yeah, it is tricky, because I think like most other data teams, you probably feel like you're sprinting all the time. And so anytime you're trying to add in something else, like building out something with AI or even just implementing AI within your current workflow, there's sort of a, you're going to take a temporarily like step back, right? Because you have to learn something new, right? And so it is tricky. And I think for a long time, we were kind of playing around with AI, using it in obvious situations, but not using it day to day or really making it a high priority. In fact, when I answered that survey, I may have been part of the 97% who wasn't prioritizing it at the time, but that's really changed here in the last couple of months. And for a few different reasons, I think probably like most organizations, there's definitely some top-down pressure to use AI and to build out AI features. So it's certainly a piece of it. But I also think like the technology has really improved, and just in the last couple of months, we've seen a lot here. And so, um, s- for example, in our BI tool, the AI features in there were some updates, and so we spend a day kind of almost like a hackathon of like, let's throw everything at it. What, how good is it? Let's evaluate it. Let's try to train it, do different things. And we were pretty floored at like how far it's come since the last time that we had kind of tested it. And we've been doing similar things with like Cursor and some other things. And so at this point, it almost feels foolish to us not to prioritize it, because even though, yeah, we got to kind of figure out the new workflow and we got to learn some new things and build it out, like it's going to save us so much time down the road. Um, and so that's kind of how we're thinking about it, is just every day what looking at our tasks and trying to, can I use AI with this? Can I make this more efficient? Can I spend a little extra time to learn this so that the next time I do this, this is significantly easier? And like I said, that's sort of a more recent way in which we're kind of prioritizing and thinking about it.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Charles,
Stephen, did you?
could I
Go
just
ahead.
add on a little bit to that? The framework that I'm using, I'm wondering if this will resonate with anyone here. I totally I agree with everything that you shared, Kelly. Is the concept of exploration voice versus exploitation, which is like how one would optimize like a multi-armed bandit model. And like I see a lot of these AI tools as like being little experiments, and at some point it flips over to, okay, I have enough confidence in this that I want to exploit it. And so the sort of the mental model that I have for prioritizing within my team is, what's the balance that I want to have between exploration versus exploitation? And when have I learned enough about a tool to either reject it or move it into the exploitation phase? And if I do, then the directive should be figure out how to use this tool and use it really well, instead of like figure out if you can see if it works.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And sometimes it's like I have one person just go test this out, just just to see this one little instance or something like that, for that exact reason. Like let's test some assumptions, let's figure out some unknowns here before we really go in deeper on it.
That's great. You kind of read my mind. I was going to ask a follow-up question about like how you would recommend like managing that. Like you're describing making an investment, right? And sometimes that takes a little bit more time up front for something that's going to give you efficiency later. Are there like how what advice would you give to someone who's like a peer who's saying, okay, how do I make time for this? Is it just making sure that you're being super transparent with your leadership about what you're trying and why? Is it setting aside hours of team schedules to do this exploration? Like, are there any tips that you have?
I think just like trying to, make an investment in anything, it's pretty similar. Where I think it always helps to have at least one advocate or top level sort of approval. In this case, I think many leadership teams are really pushing for this, so getting that buy-in isn't as hard. Um, but you do need to make it really clear what the trade-offs are. It might be, hey, we'd like to do this by this date, but we also need to invest in some AI exploration or whatever it might be, and um, you know that might push this date back for this other thing, right? And are we okay with that? Because here's what I think we're going to gain. And so, getting that buy-in, making sure that's very clear to all your stakeholders, because if they're just like, hey, what happened? You said you were going to have it by this date, and it's not, and you're like, oh, well, I've been doing this AI stuff. It's super important, I promise. That doesn't usually go over very well. So I think that's a big thing. I think also just showing what you're seeing, like showing results, even if it's really little. We do product demos every couple weeks, and so when we see things, even if it's like not ready for prime time, we're like, hey, here's something we're looking at that gets people excited, that helps get that buy-in, that keeps people going. And then setting aside time is also a piece of this. Like I mentioned, we kind of did like a hackathon. I mean, I literally set aside a whole day. I told my leadership team, hey, we're not data teams like sort of, off the radar today. We're heads down on this and we're working on it. And so there's been a couple times like that where I've really tried to kind of preserve our time and do focused effort on something like this. Um, Otherwise it's here and there that we're kind of chipping away at it. But yeah, I think trying to find some of that focus time is really key as well.
Great. Thank you. I love the idea of setting aside like AI hack days and things like that. We recently did one of those at Hex and it was really beneficial. I think some of the themes that are coming out here are, everyone is interested in AI, everyone wants to do more of it. At the time of our survey, very few were doing real things driving impact at significant scale. And I think you can see from the comments we're hearing today that that's changing even in a portion of time. And I think that's going to change even more over the next 12 months. Um, Last question for all of you. I'd love to hear all of your opinion on this. Maybe we'll start with Stephen just to go in the order that I introduced you. What is something you're excited about? What's one AI tool or capability that you think is on the horizon that you think is going to be a big impact for you in the coming months?
Yeah, thanks. We just kicked off a project internally to investigate building capability for, real-time exploration of unstructured data, particularly gong calls for us. So we have, over the last couple of years, a corpus of 500,000 gong calls. Each call is between a half hour and an hour in length in multiple different languages. So it's a really rich set of data, but really, really hard to use, especially when the context window of Claude can only handle 300 or 400 of them at a time. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of like how you collect the right sample of gong calls, how you feed it to the model, and how you prompt engineer with the model to actually get a synthesized result that answers your question. It's a deceptively hard question because I feel like with the rise of AI tools, everyone, has a lot of confidence that they can do it sort of on their own, but there's a lot of like really neat and interesting pitfalls. And so we are just like diving into that problem, and I think it's tantalizing and really, really interesting. And there's a lot of like pent up demand from really every function at HubSpot to be able to explore this set of unstructured data in a much deeper, much more specific and much more interactive way than we have in the past.
Very interesting. As someone that works in go-to-market enablement and sales enablement, I'll be interested to hear how that goes for you. If you can share any tips later on. Kelly, how about you? Tool or capability that you're really excited about?
It's hard to pick just one. I kind of mentioned the BI tool thing with the business users. That one I think we still got a little bit more work to do before it's ready for prime time. But honestly, like I think what excites me the most is when we're talking about like analytics engineering development and being able to automate so much more of that. We're using kind of having the agentic AI as well. So, for example, when a request comes in, usually we have like a form on Slack, and then we generate a linear issue. And now we're seeing integrations where from that linear issue, it connects to GitHub, and with the right requirements, it can generate that first PR within minutes. um that's a game changer, to have that, especially there's always there's development issues that you're trying to solve that are very tricky and kind of introduce a lot of new things. But when it comes to like, hey, here's a new data source and there's kind of these tables and we need a bunch of new staging tables for that, right? That's a lot more straightforward. Or hey, there's some new columns, or hey, we need to add more testing, or these are things that are much more well defined that I think are perfect for that type of scenario. And we're just in the last few months seeing a lot more integrations with AI and things like Cursor. And I think there's one that came out of Y Combinator. I think it's called like Neo Labs. It's like another IDE specifically for data purposes, with like an AI focus. And so there's these tools that are just it felt very clunky before, and it's starting to feel a lot more smooth. And I think you're going to see a more sort of end-to-end AI workflow where you're kind of just directing it and reviewing it and checking it, because it's never going to be perfect, but um, it's going to save us a ton of time. And so that's something that I'm thrilled to see and start messing around with more.
Great. Oh, that AI connecting different processes and tools and kind of helping you go from insight to action, which I think is what the kind of the holy grail of working with data is. Um, Brent, what about you?
Yeah, kind of building on what Kelly was saying, like the time to value has just changed so dramatically recently, with like Codex and Claude Code and all those tools. Um, but anyway, the things I'm excited about are the self-serve analytics by an agent that can like recursively ask uh scientific method style questions. What do I expect to see? Does this match my expectations? And just yeah, going through that whole list. And one thing that I have tried and failed a few times to build at Harvest Hosts is like a better memory stack, like whether it's RAG or GraphRag or whatever. It's just I'm not an engineer, and it's really hard to build that. Um, and having some out of the box tools to help there, I think would also be a game changer for me then being able to build an agent that can do data analytics at Harvest Hosts, or somebody else being able to do that same thing.
Very cool. I love that. Yeah, I think all of you have really interesting examples of what you're hoping to see next. It's an incredibly exciting space, and thank you so much for providing your insights and your expertise. I feel like I have a better understanding of what data leaders are doing, even how it's changed in the past few months. I hope if you're listening in, you do as well. Um, I, I promise I will leave us some time for Q&A. My marketing leadership would kill me if I didn't do a little bit of a pitch on Hex and give you kind of our point of view on all this. Um, we are noticing that I think 2025 is the year AI is kind of getting real and really useful for teams. And it seems like that's coming true kind of in front of our eyes on data. One of the things that I have spent a lot of time thinking about and working with our product team to understand is like AI is as powerful as the tools it has access to. So, um, you know, the previous generation of products that work with data were kind of focused around building these user interfaces to allow people to interact with data and dashboards without code. And that might not be the right platform to give AI as many tools as it should have to give you like actionable answers from data. And so I think newer vendors that are thinking about building a platform that's got a full suite of capabilities that can do the visualization and dashboard capabilities that business users are maybe used to working with, but can also offer new ways to introduce insights to users. I think including like generating code and doing agentic workflows that walk through kind of multiple steps in working with data, I think are the things that customers are going to get really excited about over the next few months. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of what we're doing. I think some of the things that we think are really important for AI to be able to do when working with data are explore quick questions, also explain the insights that they're generating so that people can understand what's coming out of the AI, recommend new analytic techniques, not just execute a plan, but offer a method for what to investigate or what to do next, generate code, go beyond, simple kind of surface aggregations, but also generate predictive analytics, generate more complex models, help you get through a machine learning model training or something like that, and even predict, and prescribe future behavior. So those are some of the things we're working on at Hex. I'm going to share a different screen here, and I'll show you how that comes together for us. Give me one moment here. So just real quick, how we think that comes to life for us. And this is the wrong window. Sorry, one second. Okay. There we go. So the idea with AI in Hex and what we're building right now is we want to start by making it so everyone can ask questions of data. So I'm in marketing. I'm not like a super technical person. I should still be able to investigate data. I should be able to ask a simple question like, what is our marketing traffic by channel? And the AI should be able to parse this result and give me an answer. Now, one of the problems with like historical BI tools has been when you give people self-service capabilities, they can go off on a bunch of different paths and everyone creates their own analysis and you end up with 20 different versions of the same question. And that doesn't really help to build trust and action around data in the organization. So one of the ways that we're working on that with Hex is by doing something called project deflection, where we actually offer up projects that have already been built that might be good answers to that question. So instead of going off and doing your own custom analysis, here's some answers that already exist. And that is a great way to make sure that data really turns into compounding value and assets that are kind of reused by people and are trusted centers of knowledge for the organization. But when those answers don't exist, the user should be able to go explore the data on their own and get an answer. So in this case, I'm going to assume that those answers I already got were not the right answers. I want to explore the data on my own. I get a quick answer. I get an explanation of what the tool looked at and what fields it used. It's using a semantic model under the covers here because we think that's really important to provide accuracy on data, is to have some semantic definitions so the agent knows what to do. And the user can ask follow-up questions like, how has this trended over time? And that will also process through the agent and manipulate this visual system and give us a new answer. This is within our interface in Hex that we call Explore. Explore is a really powerful kind of visual exploration tool. So users can control with drag and drop and build visualizations. They can build pivot tables. This is really for that business user use case where someone wants, with little technical knowledge to be able to kind of quickly ask descriptive questions of the data. And a lot of data exploration tools stop there. But one of the amazing things about Hex that I really love is that we've built this platform to go deeper than that. So under the covers of this, we have a full data science notebook. So maybe starting with this answer, we can open up the notebook that has the ability to do things like write SQL, write Python, create markdowns, chain together different types of analysis to do really complex analysis. And I could ask a question like, can you create a forecast of traffic by marketing source? And the agent can actually go in, it can search for the data in the different data sources that I have access to. It can create SQL statements to select the relevant data that we need to analyze this information. It can bring in Python libraries like Prophet or sklearn libraries that might be needed to do a predictive forecast. It can even create visualizations. It can even create Markdown to explain what it's done. You can ask it, just as an example, like, what would be the right way to visualize this data? And it'll give you a suggestion. So you can see in here, like as I've been talking, it's created a SQL cell. It's brought in a forecasting model using a linear regression model. It's created some forecasts. It has processed, data by different sources, kind of showing a summary of the monthly forecast and averaging across different months. And as I talk, it'll continue to generate, and it should give me a visualization of the forecast for each channel. I'll stop there because I want to leave time for Q&A, but we could follow up by asking, give me an explanation for why the forecast is expected to go up more in LinkedIn versus Meta, or create a summary of this forecast that tells me more about what I should expect in different factors. And we think that's a really exciting way of bringing this full kind of cycle of analyzing data together in one place. Anyway, that's just some of the stuff we're working on. I don't want to take up too much time because I want to make sure we get to some Q&A here. So let's do that. As we were going through our presentation today, we got a few questions. So I'm going to go ahead and read off these questions. I'll see if I can identify who on the panel would be best to answer these. But Brent, Kelly, Stephen, feel free to jump in if you feel like you have a great answer to one of these questions. So the first question is from Jasmine. She says, how do you see AI being able to handle the risk gain trade-offs frequently inherent in stakeholder questions, and that an analyst will usually dig into prior to query creation? Stephen, you were talking a little bit about the business user impact of AI, so I'd love to hear your perspective on this one.
Yeah. I think I'm understanding the question correctly. When we ask a question of Claude in particular, and it sort of generates the automatic it's like, okay, I see the analysis, here's the trends, and here are my insights on top of it. Um, it usually does so without any conception of like what is actually good or bad for the business, or like what your product or customer mix actually is, and gets those senses of scale almost comically wrong. We've just taken the approach of turning those off, right? What we have seen the AI is actually pretty good at is identifying anomalies, um, uh, being able to sort of surface the assumptions that it's making, um, and if you set the model up in the right way, it can sort of present those along with the answer and as options for follow-up or tweaks or sort of refinements to the queries. We think those are the right kinds of insights for the AI to be focusing on, and to leave sort of like the sense of scale or like importance up to the people who are actually the experts in the business. I hope that addressed the question.
Great, thank you. I think another thing that I've noticed as people have started to adopt AI agentic workflows is the presence of like a rules file or some sort of context file that you can provide to the agent that provides context for how it should respond. Like what would good be, or what would bad be, or what are some key KPIs of the organization, things that are kind of broad, often help it provide that type of context. Next question is from Cameron. He says, I'm actively shopping for a semantic layer tool, wondering about any recommendations for context engineering. If there are any recommendations on best practices for context engineering on the panel, I'd love to hear them. Don't need to provide tool recommendations on a webinar like this, but I'd love to hear if there's any thoughts on best practices from any of you.
We're also like actively evaluating tools, so I'm happy to like dive in here. My experience so far is they're all relatively equivalent. They all have differences in sort of the expressive power and capabilities of their languages. Some are more opinionated than others, and so finding one where like the expressive capability of the language matches how your AE team or BI team, their data team thinks about modeling data is like the most important thing. So that's like recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is if you're a Snowflake shop, try Snowflake Semantic Views that was released recently because it's free and it's available to you and it's actually pretty good. And so that's like a pretty good, like a low barrier to entry starting point, right?
Great. I'm going to skip over the question about Cursor AI. We can follow up with that over email. But I want to get to this last question from Jerry before we wrap for the day. Speaking of buy-in, how would you go about getting buy-in for the proper realms of the pipeline? For instance, our organization needs to be more focused on engineering, but it's hard to get leaders away from the buzzwords and broad thoughts surrounding AI and the cool stuff that comes in the finish line. How do you get them to focus on the foundations of data quality and maturity that are required for the first steps? This came up a lot in our survey as well. One of the things that seemed to be correlated with maybe a hesitance to have like a full AI strategy was like still some concerns about, people being bogged down and like just making sure the data has high quality and reliable. Um, Kelly, since you were talking about getting organizational buy-in, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. And Steve and Brent, I think you both mentioned earlier about like semantic layer and defining things as well. And so like that's I would say it's like necessary to have that to really do anything meaningful with AI. If you don't have your data defined, if you don't have those metrics defined, like it sort of the showy pieces that the business users are looking for, some of which you kind of just showed in your Hex demo of being able to quickly generate insights and answer questions, like that's not going to work very well. So you have to invest that time. And so how do you get the buy-in? It's honestly it's pretty similar to kind of what I was saying before of, you have to it's helpful to have an advocate, preferably someone from the leadership team that sees your vision, understands the importance of it, and then you need to show it, right? So if you can do something quick, so like, look, AI is not generating the correct answer here, but if I just define this one metric and the definition, then it does, right? Like being able to show that in like a very small POC can really help generate a lot of buy-in and making sure that you're investing in that foundational stuff. And obviously you have to be able to deliver value along the way, depending on where the organization's at and the your current state of data quality and what kind of infrastructure you have built out. Like you may have a long way to go. You may need to invest a lot of time before you can really take advantage of AI. And so you're going to have to find ways to make progress on that, but still deliver value along the way to your stakeholders. The good news is that you can move faster if you're using AI in your development workflow. So, hopefully that can allow teams to to kind of speed things up and invest more there. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
I would also just quickly jump in and say, I agree with everything Kelly said, but if you haven't used AI, or you're not, your business isn't using AI for unstructured classification, extraction stuff, that's the easiest way to get buy-in from leadership, because you can tell them, like, normally this would be a 2 month long hire a data science contractor or something sort of project. Uh, and now I did a proof of concept in an afternoon. And like it, yeah, they will understand that sort of time to value.
I love that. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, Kelly. And I think your comment about how if you don't have your metrics clearly defined in your data set, then putting an LLM on top of it will lead to maybe some pretty confusing or incorrect answers. But if you can show how providing some of that context to the AI system can improve the accuracy, will really help in terms of driving that adoption and getting people to trust kind of the investment they're making in those areas, I think is really key. It's answering one of the other questions we got that I didn't have time to, which is like, how does semantic layer help with democratizing access to data? What we've noticed at Hex is that a lot of customers are trying to create kind of sort of a fenced in area of inquiry where they can create really strong semantic definitions, maybe for their sales team or for a certain analytical set of questions to really power that workflow with AI, and then that helps them get in buy-in for other groups and get the investment that they would need to really take it on at scale. Um, so thank you all. You've been a terrific audience. Thanks to our panel. You guys have been really thoughtful in your responses. I really appreciate you being candid and giving us your thoughts. It was super helpful for me. Hopefully our audience felt the same. I'm seeing some thank yous and from in the chat, so it feels like it was appreciated by them as well. If you loved what you saw today, we'll be doing another episode with new guests next week on self-service BI and some of the trends there. We'll also be sending out an email with a recording of this session. And please go check out our report. There's a link in the chat if you want to read more about some of the trends that data leaders mentioned in our study. Thanks, everybody, for your time today. And Brent, Kelly, and Stephen, thank you so much for being part of this. Have a great day, everybody.